A senior Canadian government data scientist with 25 years of experience was disciplined not for the inaccuracy of his work, but for what he did with data after he attempted to discuss worrying trends with the COVID-19 vaccines to his higher ups and was ultimately ignored. Deep diving into mortality trends and vaccine reporting, this credentialed expert had his concerns dismissed and his loyalty to government messaging questioned instead. Let's dig in. Today's report is all about a man who never expected to become part of the story. His name is Dr. Dmitri Gordoni, a Ukrainian-born data scientist with 2 PhDs, one in mathematics and one in computer science. Before this fiasco began, he was a senior data scientist with decades of experience working at the National Research Council of Canada, and then he worked at the Canadian Border Services Agency, the CBSA, as a principal investigator, acting manager responsible for evaluating biometrics and artificial intelligence systems for automated border control applications. In other words, he's not an outsider. He's very much an insider with a conscience. Bound by the Federal Code of Values and Ethics, this includes a clause that discourages public criticism of government institutions by public servants. Many of his colleagues within this system must then self-censor for fear of reprisal. But in 2022, after personally reviewing official Government of Canada data, Dmitri made a decision that would alter his life. He declined to receive a second COVID-19 vaccine. The consequence for this was leave without pay. It meant months without salary or benefits, but for him, it was a professional and personal reckoning. Now, before we get into the subsequent grievance application that he's filed against his government employer, here's a short film about his decision. It was produced as part of a journalism training program and originally intended for submission to the International Film Festival before it was ordered removed by the government and has just recently been republished in correlation to his ongoing grievance hearing. Check it out.
I was very pro-vaccine in terms of pro-government, and I'm still pro-government. And that's why I went and did my first shot back in May. And then it was later that when I started looking into the data, I started seeing that the narrative is embellished in order to make results look better. Now I found that no one would talk to me. I would ask, can I share my concerns? We are not listening to your concerns. Talk to your doctor. Talk to your doctor. The doctors are not data scientists. Next week, I have my pre-disciplinary hearing because I have the letter which essentially alleges breaking the code of conduct by not showing loyalty to my employer. As Government of Canada employees should refrain from criticizing the government in public. I have tools. I have my weapon, which is data, and my knowledge. Other people don't have these tools, this ammunition. I'm equipped with ammunition. I'm equipped with the strongest, the most powerful ammunition you can get, which is data, official data, bulletproof data. I came from a communist country, and by the way, I had free education, free gymnastics, free music, everything free. I've never seen anything bad about Soviet Union until we started having perestroika, glasnost, and when they started talking about things which were actually happening. If you are not enthusiastic about Communist Party, you will not have good career. You will have problems. And here also, if you're saying something bad about vaccines, you may have problems. You will be disciplined. You will be...
This isn't a story about hyperbole, it's about evidence and the inherent friction or clash between institutional loyalty and scientific conscience in the wake of indiscriminate COVID-19 edicts and public health diktats, basically presenting the government's own data and teaching others how to independently analyze and interpret it through Friday afternoon lunch and learns, something that Dmitri had always hosted for his colleagues pre-2020. became all of a sudden a threat to the safe and effective narrative and the "it's a pandemic of the unvaccinated" rhetoric we saw from government-funded shills.
Population size. And blue line is the average for all Canadians. And then the red one, or if it's above blue line, it means for this population it's worse. If it's lower than blue line, for this population it's better. And what we see here that, let's say, for 3 doses, you see it's about the same as for average population. And so we see for 1 dose, for 0 doses, for 2+ doses, for 3 doses. So this is how you can see how much doses help. Now, a very important comment here is that, of course, you have to understand, or I have to understand, everyone has to understand that doses are given first to those people who are most vulnerable, who are already about to die, so to speak. It's very unfortunate that we have to say it this way, but people do die on a regular basis, and these most vulnerable people, they were given vaccines the first. They were the first to be administered the vaccine, and vaccine saved them, or at least it delayed, we could say, delayed their death. If the average age or the average mortality rate in Canada is about 82 years, so it actually remained about the same. So maybe vaccine helped really for this high-risk population to delay their deaths. But for the younger population, of course, then it's a much more challenging question. Did it help or did it not? Because we know that after May, again, everyone, including children, were vaccinated or forced to vaccinate not to lose their job, because you cannot live, of course, without income. You just can try to put yourself in the shoes of anyone who has mortgages, children going to activities, and you are given this ultimatum of they say a choice. You're given a choice.
Now, when Dmitri was placed on leave, he honed in on his platform called IVIM. It stands for Independently Verified Information Machines, and he further developed it to test official narratives against publicly available data sets. One such tool, examining Canadian mortality statistics, raised questions for him during the pandemic. Questions he says he could not ignore. Growing up in the Soviet Union, he learned how information ecosystems shape perception. Working in Canada, he came to believe that democratic systems depend not only on trust, but on scrutiny. That's when this senior government data scientist decided that silence was no longer an option. He saw the data for what it was and began speaking out even more, eventually even giving a speech to the Freedom Convoy in early 2022. But he was back to work by the summer when the government finally rescinded the nonsensical COVID-19 vaccine mandate. By that fall, the government once again suspended Dmitri without pay for 5 days for posting information that went against the narrative the employer was promoting, which is that COVID-19 vaccines are safe and effective. Dmitri points out the massive amounts of propaganda and misinformation put out by the Public Health Agency of Canada and, by extension, Health Canada. He then launched a grievance against the government, which was before the Federal Public Sector Labor Relations and Employment Board late last week, from February 18th to the 20th. Dmitri challenges that 5-day suspension as both disproportionate and punitive. There was testimony and cross-examination of Dmitri's former director, Kaveh Afshar, and testimony and cross-examination of Nicholas Vincent, then acting director of data science. Key points included Dmitri's credentials and the value of interactive visualization tools for revealing hidden patterns in public data, evidence of internal emails from January to February 2022, where he raised post-October 2021 data concerns to management, which again were largely unaddressed. Management's view that Dmitri's public posts and questioning undermined government messaging. The matter seemed to conclude that there was no clear nexus to the CBSA border mandate necessarily, but that this was purely about a public servant's social media activity, most of which occurred after his first leave in February 2022, at a time when Dmitri had no access to government networks. There was no specific written order to remove vaccine-related posts, but rather vague general instructions to avoid reputational harm to the government. The board contended that the witnesses were not qualified to weigh in on p-hack or StatsCan data accuracy, and that the employer does not dispute the raw data or the visualization quality, but rather clung to the hearing being about Dmitri's apparent breach of loyalty, and if the suspension was in fact excessive, rather than about the validity of the data or vaccine safety concerns he had been trying to escalate and get answers on. It was what he did with the data, not what the data showed, that no one seems to want to talk about. The hearing was abruptly adjourned and is scheduled to resume at a later date, likely in the coming weeks or even perhaps months. An updated schedule is expected to be posted on the official website, so stay tuned, because this apparently is what happens when evidence is ignored and the messenger becomes the target. For Rebel News, I'm Tamara Ugolini. Please head on over to nomoreshots.ca if you would like to see more reports on the topic of these novel modified RNA injections. You can sign our petition there calling for the market revocation of these injections and consider supporting this kind of journalism if you appreciate it. That's nomoreshots.ca.